You're going to cover everything that we need to know. So if you've been out of transactions, if you have any questions around the home inspection, today is your day because we're going to cover all that right now. So go ahead, Philippe. The floor is yours. Let's get started. What do we need to know?
I've been doing inspections since 2004, and the company now is quite large. We've got 18, 19 inspectors working all over Southern California. So we've got collectively tons and tons of experience. So we love sharing our knowledge, and I wanted to go over some things today for both the new and the seasoned agent, because things are changing all the time. And I wanted to go over what everybody's role is and how basically to reduce liability. That's the end result. Is we want the buyers to understand what they're getting into, sellers to be protected against lawsuits for people always claim non-disclosure. So the inspector really reveals all these things that the sellers may not even know about. Okay, so what is the role of a home inspection in the real estate transaction? I'm going to go over some statistics, how you can leverage the report depending on what side of the deal. We always say the party that gets the inspection first usually has the upper hand in the inspection. So we're going to talk about a little bit the difference between a buyer's inspection and a pre-listing inspection, or one that is typically done for a seller. And also when sellers should get an inspection and why. Why does it save the seller some money? And also lately, we've seen a lot of sellers getting an inspection and then basically saying, hey, we're looking for non-contingent offers. We don't agree with that. We think that's going to cause some liability, but it does allow the sellers to be more protected because they've had an inspection and they know what to disclose. So if they do get a non-contingent offer, there's a risk there that they may not be disclosing everything. With an inspection in hand, they're going to avoid a lot of that.
All right, it's a good point. I don't really think about that too often.
Yeah, and so much of that has gone on. And I think there are already lawsuits starting because buyers who gave a non-contingent offer are finding problems with the home and saying that the sellers didn't disclose these. And
I think definitely with the heavy-weighted sellers market right now, I think that this is a new point of view that we need to understand. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, you bet. And so let's get back to buyer's inspection. So how can a buyer's agent really ease, because it's stressful, right? It's the 800-pound gorilla in the transaction. We're coming in at the 11th hour. Oh, the scary home inspection is going to occur. This could blow up the deal, right? So the best thing for an agent to do is set the proper expectations with their client. Maybe they're a new buyer, first-time buyer. Maybe they just haven't bought a house in 10, 15 years. And this is a whole new experience. Home inspections were very different 15 years ago than they are today. So really understanding the process and setting the expectations is huge. You want to leave adequate time to respond to what comes up in the home inspection. Don't wait till the last minute in case you have to get a quote or in case you have to have further evaluation. If you only leave yourself, 24 hours, you may overrun your contingency period, and then that's a problem. You want to make sure, work with the listing agent to make sure the property is prepared. We get there sometimes and utilities have been turned off because the sellers have moved out of state, or there's animals, dogs in the house that should be confined, or just too much stuff. Like people are packing and moving, and the inspector can't do a thorough inspection because of it. Yes.
I'm sorry, I got to bring that up because that is a great point, and I love the way that you highlighted that. First thing, going back to what you said, is set the expectations because it really shows the clients what the agent's value is too. Having that mastery, it builds trust. So if you let them know what to expect and paint that picture very clearly, when it happens, they're going to have the automatic association that this person knows what they're doing because they told me this was going to happen and it did. The other one that you said is perfect, and you went quick because you're a pro at this. Big mistake is if the utilities get turned off. Remember, in order to do a proper inspection, all the things that they're inspecting need to be able to be turned on. So again, without power, without gas, you're not going to have those items that utilize gas and power. They're not going to be able to be inspected properly or at all.
Correct. And many inspectors are so busy right now that they're very likely going to be a charge to go back out to the house because they're giving up another inspection time slot to, kind of come back out to the house and run those systems that couldn't be run. I wanted to go back to the other part about setting proper expectations, which we'll get into a little bit more. If you're in a market with older homes, for example, Kensington, North Park, whatever, those homes are different than a brand new home. And some of the younger people who are buying houses now for the first time, they don't always understand that construction methods are old and they've changed. And so it's like buying a classic car. Some of them don't even have seat belts. They don't have power steering. They don't have power windows, things like that. So explaining this, making sure your buyers understand. And we have some resources that I'm going to share that are free. We put together some white papers about what to expect when buying older homes so that your buyer understands what cast iron plumbing is, or the lack of GFCI receptacles. Why would one house not have it? And so those are the kinds of things that you can give to your buyers to set those expectations. And then don't assume that the home warranty is going to fix stuff. We've heard agents say that to the client. Oh, the inspector found a leaking water heater. Don't worry about it. Your home warranty is going to buy you a new one. No, they won't. And we've seen agents on the hook have to pay for a water heater because they made that promise. So please avoid doing that. You could say, hey, something's old and it's still working and it's going to be covered by your home warranty, but don't make promises that you're not 100% confident are correct.
And this is, I think, also a good point, because that becomes part of the negotiation process to understand that you have to take into account with the purchase home, this thing doesn't appear to work. So no moving in, buyer disclosure, that the thing was inspected and the result of that inspection is this.
I think the gray area, or kind of the frustration, comes, it's very easy to say, hey, this item is not working. Your furnace does not turn on. It's, ancient. Clearly it needs to be replaced. That's easy, right? That's an easy discussion to have. What's frustrating is when something is 30 years old and it still works, but we are compelled to tell a buyer that, look, this furnace is working today, but I have to tell you that it's way beyond its expected life and you should budget to replace it at some point. Then the buyer's like, well, shouldn't the sellers buy me a new one? Well, no, they don't have to. And so it goes down that path. And those are the frustrating conversations sometimes with items that are functional, but simply way beyond their expected life. And that happens a lot in San Diego because our weather is good and we don't use furnaces that much. But that's where the conversation gets tricky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, please go on. I'll try to hold back my questions as best possible.
Oh, no, that's fine. You jump in whenever you want. So what is a home inspection? Most agents understand where this fits into the transaction. A home inspector is hiring a home inspector is much cheaper than hiring individual licensed professionals in every trade for every component of a house. You could do that. Your buyers could hire a roofer and an electrician and an HVAC guy and structural engineers, and they're going to get a great evaluation of that house, but it's going to be very time consuming and very expensive. So you hire a home inspector who hopefully is very competent in all the disciplines of the house, and but he's still a generalist. He doesn't have an engineering degree, and he's not a licensed roofer. But based on his experience, he or she is going to be able to identify things that aren't right and make recommendations on how to deal with them. So that's the whole point of hiring an inspector. It's a cheaper, more efficient way of getting an evaluation of a house. If you're buying a really, unique house that has some intricate or unique architectural components or engineering, you may want to hire an architect or an engineer to look at that. But for the vast majority of homes, a home inspector is perfectly suitable for that evaluation. And keep in mind, it's a snapshot of the house on the day of the inspection. Home inspectors can't predict things other than what we talked about. Something's old and it's going to break at some point in the near future, or a roof that's worn. But really, the report that you're going to get is going to be an evaluation for that day. Were things working? I can't predict if the roof is going to leak if it's not raining. I'm not lifting tiles and really looking. It's no guarantee of the condition of the house. It's really just an evaluation on that day. And of course, home inspectors can only report on observable defects. If something's hidden in the wall or really is covered by personal items, like I started with, too much stuff in the garage and he can't get to the water heater, the inspector's not going to be able to report on it. That's why it's important to at least have everything accessible on the day of the inspection.
So will they actually issue a report noting that they weren't able to properly inspect an item due to obstruction?
Absolutely. We have to, because otherwise, when the buyer moves in and the seller's possessions are gone, they're going to say, well, why couldn't you look at this water heater? It's right there. Like I can walk up to it and touch it. So we do document when something is inaccessible during the inspection. We have to, because that's just, we have to be able to show the conditions on the day of the inspection if we don't look at something, because we're getting paid to do something, right? So if I pay you to come to my house and do something and you can't accomplish it, you should be able to give me a reason of why you couldn't. And so the inspectors will do that. So the agents, most of the time we have the real estate agent booking the inspection. And therefore, it's kind of incumbent on the agent to do your homework, make sure your clients, just like they hired you, make sure that you're recommending people who are ethical and experienced and are going to stand behind their work. It reduces your liability. It's the best thing for your client. And many times, you want to look for resources like the ones I told you about that help prepare the buyer for an inspection, whether it's a good website or even an inspector that they can reach out to ahead of time to kind of prep the buyer and answer any questions or concerns that they may have. So now, how does an inspection benefit the seller? We're always worried that an inspection is going to torpedo, it's against the seller, like we're out to get the seller. And it's really not. It really does protect the seller in the sense that a lot of sellers have not been in the attic in their house, maybe ever. They haven't crawled underneath it if it has a crawl space. They don't really know. We all have those little quirks in our house that we just become accustomed to. Maybe a faucet that has reversed hot and cold, or a door that doesn't really lock well unless you kind of jiggle the handle, and you just kind of get used to it. And the problem with that is that when a buyer moves in and he has that problem and has to pay to fix it, he's going to blame the seller for non-disclosure. So having an inspection can really help identify things that the seller hasn't been aware of and make sure the seller knows about it, so there's no misunderstandings after the close. So of course, as an agent, you're going to want to use somebody who's professional, not somebody who does this part-time. You want to look at their reviews. Do they carry E&O insurance and general liability? There's more than just making a mistake. Things break. It's not on purpose. We're moving things. We're opening doors and cabinets and toilet tank lids and all sorts of stuff. So you want to make sure that the inspector has not only E&O insurance, but general liability insurance as well. And if it's a multi-inspector firm, you want to make sure that they carry workers' comp, because the last thing you want to have happen is an inspector perhaps fall off his ladder in somebody's house, and then all of a sudden the homeowner's getting sued for it. So you want to make sure that a bigger company carries workers' comp for their employees, just like in any business, especially when they're climbing ladders and getting in the attic. There's a risk. We're opening electric panels and doing things that are somewhat dangerous, and we want to take care of our inspectors in case they do get hurt. Does your inspector offer a variety of services, just as inspecting pools, doing sewer scopes, inspecting guest houses, barns, shops, outbuildings? Can they do mold sampling? These are all things that are very convenient, so that you as a real estate agent have one phone call to make and say, hey, I need these services done for my client. Okay, so important questions to ask your home inspector. Have they been professionally trained? And if so, how? Because a lot of people come into this industry, and it's not bad to come in without, being a general contractor, but you want to make sure that they were trained properly to do so. Just like real estate agents come from a variety of backgrounds. Nobody's born a real estate agent. They become educated. They work in a great company with hopefully good mentors and good brokers. Same thing as home inspectors. They should be trained. They should have an aptitude for it, and hopefully they're getting mentored really, really well by somebody. How much experience does that person have in the field? There's a lot of stuff, and I can tell you that even after nearly 20 years in this business, there's still things that come up that surprise me, that I just cannot believe we've never seen before. It happens all the time. And you want to make sure that the inspector is doing this full time. You don't want somebody who has limited availability or isn't, this isn't their passion, their livelihood. You want to make sure that this is something that somebody lives and breathes and is constantly becoming educated about, because that's what they do. That's who they are. Do they belong to any professional organizations? So there's a lot of them you may hear. InterNACHI, ASHI, CREA. These are all great organizations. Remember that home inspectors in the state of California are not licensed. So there's nothing that the state does to decide who can be and who cannot be a home inspector. Unlike real estate agents, you guys have to test and get a license. Home inspectors do not. So the way we kind of demonstrate that we're capable and qualified is that we become certified by one of these organizations. And so you want to ask that the home inspector you're going to use is certified and in good standing with whatever association they belong to. Another thing is you have to ask yourself, do you like the independent guy, or do you like somebody who works at a company that has a staffed office and isn't going to be taking calls when they're dealing with your clients? Home inspections are expensive. You should have that inspector's undivided attention and not answering calls, worrying about booking the next appointment. So, you know, if that's really important to you, make sure, ask if they have a staff at the office that can take care of these things for them while they're working. We talked about insurance, workers' comp. We provide health care for our guys, and we want to make sure they're healthy and taken care of no matter what's going on. And of course, for the sellers and the buyers, we have E&O and general liability.
So you just covered quite a bit. And I just
Mhm.
wanted to take a moment just to reiterate so we don't forget, agents that are watching and maybe taking down notes. One thing that really stands out here is understanding the service, the staff, the ability, the qualifications, the certifications of who you're working with. These are things that agents will usually learn after having a bad experience. And then they realize, I'm not going to deal with that again. Because if you go through an instance where something comes up with an inspection and then the client is demanding some sort of answer, you go back to the inspector for some sort of correction or more detail on the issue, and they're not available. Working with a larger put together company that has those services will alleviate all that. So that's just one of the examples that you can run into. And then also the certification and the insurance. You don't want to be the agent that ends up having an inspector injured on site and then dealing with a lawsuit because they didn't carry any workman's comp. And thereafter, after that experience, you would never do that again. So part of this training is helping us learn from other things that we've experienced in the past. And then lastly, something that keeps on, I think, very important, comes up here in my mind as I'm hearing everything you're saying, is due to the nature of the market right now, where buyers are given, they're waiving all sorts of things or given really small inspection periods, making sure that inspection happens, doesn't have to get rescheduled, and actually does get done professionally is huge, especially when representing the seller for that disclosure issue. Having a fresh set of eyes come through and point out anything, you're already getting above asking by crazy amounts of money on this market.
Right.
This isn't going to torpedo the deal. What it is going to do is going to prevent you from any significant liability after the close. That's the way that I see it.
Yep. And think about, buyers they're coughing up every spare nickel that they have to buy homes today. And so they may not have any funds left to make repairs. So it's still a good idea that even if somebody's buying something as is, they should still know what is means. They need to know the condition and is it within their budget and their scope. So it is very important. And let me tell you, just for maybe perhaps the newer agents out there, don't think that it's just the home inspector's problem if something comes up afterwards. If somebody lawyers up, they name everyone involved in the transaction, including the agents, even though you could not possibly have known about, let's say, a crack in the slab underneath carpet. There's no way for you to know that because you can't see it. But when somebody moves in, rips the carpet back, they see this big problem, and it gets to the point where they're going to sue and they hire an attorney, that attorney will name everybody in the lawsuit and it will go against your E&O insurance. Just so you know, that's guaranteed that you're going to get named.
Absolutely true and a very good point.
Okay. Oh. All right. We talked about a lot of the stuff about the company, ease of scheduling. Can you do it online at 10 o'clock at night? Have they been around a long time? Again, look at their reviews and maybe talk to some other people in your office. Are they professional? Do they show up, company shirt, clean vehicle, just like a contractor who would show up to your house? You don't want somebody who looks like they just rolled out of a swap meet, right? You want somebody who looks professional. Okay, on home inspection day. So having a home inspection is like giving a house physical checkup. It's not invasive. They're not going to cut anything. We're not going to open walls. We're there to identify, describe, and recommend. Just like a doctor sees you, and if they see some weird, discoloration, they may recommend that you see a dermatologist. That's exactly what a home inspector does. We're looking for anomalies, and when we identify something, we say, "Hey, you should consult further with this professional, whether it's a plumber, electrician, roofer, etc." All right, inspection scope. So just like building codes, the home inspectors operate under a set of SOPs, or standard operating procedures. It outlines the minimum level of inspection that a home inspector should do. Okay, there are certain things that they absolutely should be looking at when they're doing a home inspection. Just like building codes, though, somebody could build a house to the basic building code, and then it's going to be safe. It's going to be a nice house, but it's not going to have a lot of the conveniences or nice touches that a higher end home does. And it's the same thing with our SOPs. So, for example, more and more inspectors are using thermal imaging, which is what this picture shows, but it's certainly way beyond the standard of practice. And you want to know that, like how far above, because people always want to default to the price. And that's only one metric to evaluate when you're considering a home inspector. There are things like how far beyond the standards of practice do you go? Will you check appliances, which, believe it or not, are not even included in the standards of practice? So you want to make sure somebody's checking the appliances, walking on the roof, using thermal imaging cameras. Do they have a moisture meter? Things of that nature that go way beyond are very important tools. So in this picture, you can see the thermal image. If you look at the actual image, you can see there's a bathroom on the right side of the image where there's a shower and a toilet. And on the left side is a bedroom. And without the use of thermal imaging, you wouldn't see that the shower pan is actually leaking and making the carpeting wet in the bedroom. So you can see that dark spot in the thermal image is moisture in that carpet. You would not be able to see this. And now imagine somebody moves in, they plunk a dresser on top of that, and they wouldn't know for months that there's a problem until they have a mold problem. So these are the kinds of things where going beyond this SOPs is extremely important to identify these things. All right. So an inspection report should only, this is where inspectors should stay within standards of practice. The inspection report should only include identifying problems and concerns. Like here's the example, dishwasher didn't drain. Describe the defect, the pump did not turn on or appears clogged, and then a direction to resolve the problem. Recommend further repair replacement by a qualified appliance technician. That is what should be done. Inspectors should refrain from making a lot of assumptions or even putting prices in there. We're not that qualified appliance tech. If inspectors are throwing out prices and then the actual cost to repair is very different, they're going to get in trouble. Your buyers may be very unhappy with that because they say, well, the inspector said it was going to be $100 and the tech charged me $300. That's a big difference. So inspectors should avoid throwing out prices unless they really know what it is that they're talking about. Delivery of the report, it should be quick. The report should be there the same day, if not by that evening. If it's a very messy house, maybe within 24 hours. And how are they delivering it? Are they giving you a 3-ring binder with a bunch of paper that has to be faxed around and very inconvenient? Or is it in an electronic format? You'll have to decide, but most everybody wants an electronic version these days. The cost of inspection. So not all inspectors do the same thing. They don't have the same experience. The companies aren't the same. They're not standing behind their inspections. They don't have, company vehicles and doing all of these great things that exceed the SOP. So the costs do vary. You can expect that now with the cost of labor and all the other insurances and whatnot, really a basic insurance is going to be at least starting at $400, $450 for a small house, pretty standard house. And it goes up from there. Inspection costs can easily get to $500 to $800 for your basic tract house without a pool. All right, again, getting back to setting expectations, every inspector uses an agreement the insurance companies require it, and read it. Have your clients read it. Know what that inspector is going to include and exclude from their inspection report. Very important. So again, setting the expectations. We're crystal clear in ours on what is involved in our inspection and what is specific. For example, we're not engineers. So we may notice and comment on a retaining wall that is failing, but we're not going to make any kind of prediction about how stable a hillside is, because that's way beyond our knowledge base, and it would be misleading and not in our best interest or the buyer's best interest for us to comment on that. So read that inspection agreement and know what is included and what's not included. So we always tell people that, look, every house is right for somebody. There's a buyer for every single house out there, but this house just may not be right for your client. When we find some things that, if a house has to have its entire electrical system redone because it has knob and tube wiring, it may just not be something that that buyer is willing to take on. It's just too much disruption, too much cost, whatever it is. But a flipper may love that house, or somebody with experience doing it, or a little bit more money, they may do it. So make sure you're matching that house with the right client. This is a great house. I think it's in Scripps Ranch. And instead of cutting down the trees, they just built the roof around it. That was kind of unique.
That is unique.
So when the inspector finds problems, they're going to find stuff. I mean, except on the newest, most precious, well-maintained house, there's always something that's going to come up. Expect it. Don't be surprised. It could be something very insignificant and minor. It could be coming down to a measurement of, let's say, the height of the garage door opener button. But it's there for a reason. It's there to protect kids from playing with the garage door. And it may seem so silly to say, oh, well, this is 6 inches too low, but it could save a kid's life or avoid an injury. And I know that sounds dramatic, but things happen. And all of these measurements and safety procedures have been built in for a particular reason. And the inspector who's doing a good job is going to point that out, because the new family moving in is different than the people who have lived there for 15 years. They just are. Their kids are different, everything. So you want to make sure that the house they're buying is safe and they're not going to have any problems from something that could have easily been avoided. All right, buyer freakout syndrome. So if the buyer chooses to move on to a different house, they'll find a house with concerns they can live with. And someone else will buy that first house, guaranteed, especially in this market. So it's just all a matter of the buyer's level of comfort. So you want to know your clients really well. Are they willing to take on a house that may need some fixing, put in some sweat equity? Do they have relatives or some sort of resources that can help walk them through it? If they're not, they just want to go to work and come home and have a perfect house, then you know what kind of houses to show them. And make sure that you're having that conversation. If that's what they told you at first, that they don't want any problems, but then they're looking at houses that they're going to require a lot of elbow grease, sweat equity, you have to have that serious conversation with them that, hey, look, I want to be really clear about how expensive these items are and what you're getting into.
And again, a lot of agents' business is by referral, and we've got to get around the idea of kind of blaming an inspection for killing it, or an inspection for killing a deal. We've got to realize that an inspection helps us make sure that this is the absolute right fit for the client, so they are happy with it for years after the transaction.
Correct.
If they move in or if they get an inspection done and there's a lot of issues, they do choose to move in, they're going to be happy because they leveraged everything in the inspection to get the repairs or get the price where they want it. And they knew that going in, and it turns out to work out with what they wanted. Or the opposite, if they do the inspection to ensure everything's working because they don't have the time to deal with repairs after they move in. Not saying that no repairs will be needed, but the inspection will help you understand the scope of possibility repairs.
Correct. And what we have found in our studies, talking to clients and agents after the fact, is that the average home inspection yields 3 to 4 times the cost of the inspection in seller concessions. Now we're in a bit of a unique market, which is normalizing, but in a normal market, whatever you pay for the home inspection, say it's $600, you're going to realize at least 3 to 4 times that in seller concessions. There may be tree trimming that needs to be done. There may be an appliance that needs repair or water heater replaced. So a $600 inspection could yield $1,800 to $2,400 in concessions. So it's really a fast turnaround on that investment. So as far as attending the inspection, should a buyer attend? Yeah, we think that they should, unless you know them and they're going to be super overbearing and get in the way of the home inspector. And anyway, we highly, our inspectors like to have the inspectors there. I'm sorry, have the buyers there and be able to answer questions to a point. You know, as long as they're not so inquisitive that they prevent the home inspector from doing their job. Sometimes it's best that the clients only show up towards the end of the inspection and catch the summary and really go over just the high points. And you'll know your client better than anybody. So if they're really nervous or they're just, you know, that type of personality that asks a question about everything, you know, the time is limited. So maybe wait till they get there about 30, 45 minutes before the end of the inspection.
I think that the agent needs to know their client and what they're setting them up for. So in regards to attending the inspection, like you said, they've got to use their judgment to understand, is the client comfortable in seeing this happen, or is it just going to result in more anxiety, which it would be better for them to not be present and you deliver it in a one-on-one meeting after the fact, right?
Exactly. Yep. And in this time coming off of COVID and all this stuff, we did a ton of inspections, obviously with nobody there, and then did a Zoom or a FaceTime summary after the fact. And it worked out great. So, you know, worst case scenario, if you have an out of town buyer, we can certainly do that. And it's a good way to make sure that you're not being the third party. Like, let your clients talk to the home inspector and hear that summary. You don't want to get caught in the middle of and then being accused of not conveying something that was wrong with the house. So let's see. This has to go with the scope of stuff that we find out there. Remember, a home inspector, they may show up to your house and you think, well, you should know everything about this house. But they also need to know everything about houses built from in San Diego and Southern California, let's say from the late 1890s to brand new, including all the crazy stuff that, you know, weekend warriors do to their house. And it is crazy to see some of the repairs that homeowners do. And that's the kind of thing that an experienced home inspector can see through and identify. What does bad wiring look like? You know, unsafe repairs to a deck. These are things that to an untrained eye could be life-threatening. And they're not taught in a book because you can't possibly cover what's wrong, right? We can only know what the way it should be. So that's why you want somebody with a little bit of experience under their belt so that they can identify these crazy things. But even so, you know, sometimes an inspector is going to say, I don't know, and I'm going to have to do some research on this and get back to you. And they will. They have resources. You know, in our company, they can talk to each other, and they've got, you know, hundreds of years collectively of experience, and we usually get the answer immediately. But you know, some inspectors may need to go home and do a little research on something, but they're going to get you the answer. Let's see. This is a big one. Advise the buyer that if they break something, they're going to have to pay for it in somebody's house, right? They're sort of a guest, but they're also being let in, and they should be on their best behavior, just like any guest. Home inspectors are. I know if one of my guys breaks something, we're writing a check to replace it. No questions asked. It wasn't broken when we got there, and we take a lot of pictures so we know what was in good order and what wasn't. Same thing with the buyers. If they break it, I'm not paying for it. And we've had that where buyers run around, they're so excited, and they're turning on faucets, for example, and they're getting out of sight of the inspector. And we've had home buyers create a flood in a house because they thought they were helping. Now I'm going to get these faucets running upstairs, and there was a backup, and it's happened a couple times. We've actually had agents do that. You know, newer agents, they run around. Don't do the inspector's job. Okay, don't turn on valves. There are certain valves we don't touch, and it's happened many times when an agent honestly in the best possible scenario, they're trying to help, and they turn on a valve, and then we have a big problem. So be very careful when you're in a new house that you're not familiar with.
I just say they're sharing your experience, learn from your past experiences, and just advise them clearly.
Yep. And your E&O will not cover you if you cause a flood. We went through this with an agent, and he turned on the upstairs laundry room utility sink thinking he was helping the inspector, and it backed up, and they don't have overflow drains, so it flooded, and everyone's standing in the garage, and water starts leaking out of the ceiling. Turns out it was somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 to remediate that, dry it out, fix the sheetrock, repaint. And his E&O insurance, because it wasn't an error, it was a general liability thing. And I don't know if he didn't have general liability, but he had to pay for it out of pocket because he turned that on. So use caution. Should the sellers have immediate access to the inspection report? In California, sellers are entitled to the copy of the inspection report. How quickly they get it, that's between the buyer and the agent if you want to review it first. But just know that a seller is entitled to have a copy of it in California, and which is actually good. It's a good leveraging point, because if there are things that need repair, the seller can't just ignore them because he's going to have to disclose them to the next buyer. So it does give the current buyer some leverage, because that seller is going to have to address that issue at some point, either disclose it, pay for it, fix it, something. So sellers are entitled to it. How quickly they get it, we don't always send it to them unless we're given the listing side's information. So we let the buyer's agent send that on to the selling side. All right, let's see. Yeah, let your buyers know, or your clients, either side, how long an inspection takes. On a standard house, expect it to take at least 2.5 to maybe 4.5 hours if it's a bigger home, or if it's in good condition or not. It's funny, sometimes we get people thinking, well, I didn't think it took any longer because the house was in disrepair. Of course it does. There's more things to photograph and document. So set those expectations as well. The client should set aside, take half a day off of work so that you have plenty of time to sit through the inspection. You don't want the inspector to rush, that's for sure. If you have more and more home inspections are paid ahead of time. The inspection agreement has to be signed ahead of time. So this is especially important if you have foreign clients or even out-of-state clients and investors who aren't necessarily going to be at the inspection, or if it's the house is being transferred as a result of a probate. Make sure that the fees are paid up front. Home inspectors don't have much recourse, of course, if they don't get paid, so they usually won't release the report until payment has been made. So avoid that, make sure that payment's done, and set that expectation that they get paid ahead of time. Report delivery, as I said before, should be same day, electronic. It should include photos, at least. More and more of them are including video now, which is great to document something that's making a lot of noise, or just garage door that won't shut. And so some reports are really, really cool these days, and you're getting a lot of information. Look on the inspector's website to see if they have a good sample report. All right, what should you do with the inspector's findings? Make sure everything's disclosed. You can, of course, again, in a more normal market, you can request that certain things get repaired or get monetary compensation for some of the items to get repaired. Maybe you don't want the seller to fix the old dishwasher. You just want $500 to put towards a new one. So this is the time, this is what you do with the findings of the inspection report. And what would you say, Will, is because there could be 20, 30 items in a house, but what's your advice on how many or what the scope of reasonable requests include?
That is going to be down to the agent, the client, and the property. Right now, we're seeing so many concessions on the buy side just to get offers accepted, that that is the agent's complexity that they have to unravel to make that decision. Typically, though, we want to find out what the most important things are to the buyer. And here's the answer, sorry. The proper answer to that is whatever is right for the client. Whatever the client is going to end up feeling that you're doing right by their wants, that's the answer. So this is something the agent will help advise and help from experience kind of get them some understanding of where they're going with this. But really it comes down to is satisfying that client. Because the biggest liability you can have in a transaction is an unsatisfied client. There's a lot of reasons that are the recurring cause behind it, but what it comes down to is whether or not the client's satisfied.
Yep. I would just set that expectation too, that, if they're buying an older home, not everything's going to be perfect. And it's probably unreasonable to ask the seller to fix everything and make that house new. You know, he's not going to change out single pane windows to double pane windows just because you asked. So there is a sense of reasonableness that has to go along with that. All right. Inspector responsibility to the seller. So we go in there and we treat the house like it's our in-laws house. We try to leave it exactly how we found it. Yes, we turn on the heat and the air conditioning, but we reset the thermostat to where it was. If we've actually had very irate phone calls from sellers because they accuse the home inspector of leaving a toilet seat up, and their precious kitty isn't supposed to drink out of the toilet, and it's a big deal. So we really do our best to put the house back down to the toilet seats and the curtains and the blinds. I had somebody yell at me because their bird was very upset because the blinds were left open. So as agents, it's very compelling to go into a home and open the curtains and open the windows and get some fresh air in. And just know that if you're the last one to leave, to try and put it back the way it was when you got there. And that's what home inspectors try to do. Of course, we don't want to leave the house a mess.
What I'm hearing you say is that you've got experience in this, because this is true.
Yes.
It's somewhat of an invasive process as a seller, having people look into your home, and that puts them typically in a state of mind where they're on edge of anything that's out of place. And inspectors that have been doing this for an extended period of time definitely develop a checklist to say, I'm going to make sure that I mark off and reset everything to the way it was, because this is one of those things where you don't expect it from the outside looking in. You wouldn't see it as such a massive deal, but from the perception of the client, it is, and it's easy to be overlooked. So this just speaks to really developing your client experience and making it an awesome product for the client, and really just great service.
Yeah, the only things that I would not leave as I found them is anything that was unsafe. An open gate to a pool, a scented candle burning unattended. And I know that when I leave, I'm the last person to see that candle. I'm going to blow it out. Those kinds of things. But otherwise, we really make an effort to leave that house exactly like we found it. All right, let's keep going here. So let's talk about the selling side. So you get a listing and you think, well, what do I need an inspection for? I'm going to let the buyer pay for it. But this can actually save your sellers a lot of headache and a lot of money. What do I mean by that? Okay, if you're selling a house from the 90s, let's say, and a buyer's inspector comes in and he does his test on the air conditioning and he finds it's not cooling that well. Now, all of a sudden, that buyer, seeing that this air conditioning unit is 30 years old, they may be asking you for a whole new system, 15 grand, 20 grand. Had you had it inspected prior to putting it on the market, and you found out that maybe it just needs a tune-up and a service and some refrigerant, and it's going to pass on the day of the inspection. I really shouldn't use that term pass-fail, but it works properly on the day of the inspection. Remember, it's a snapshot in time. It's not predictive. We may note that it's 30 years old, but it was working fine on the day of the inspection. Then that is something that would be covered by a home warranty. Okay, so, but getting it done for the seller may save him many thousands of dollars by spending a couple $100 getting his AC tuned up so it works properly on the day of the inspection, rather than waiting for that buyer to find that it's not cooling properly. And now, oh, my HVAC guy says that the whole system needs to be replaced. I want $15,000. So saves a lot of grief by doing a pre-listing inspection and avoiding the stress that comes in the 11th hour of a contingency period. Also, a lot of sellers, as I said, especially, I don't want to say older necessarily, because older people they grew up taking care of things more so than younger people do. We're so used to having someone else do it, but the older generation took care of a lot of stuff. But, it may have been years since they've been in the attic or crawl space. So doing a pre-listing inspection is very important, because you're going to find things that otherwise may go undisclosed. And again, the buyer's inspector is going to find it and disrupt your deal. So it is a good idea to have a pre-listing inspection. Another thing is when an item does come up for repair, it allows the seller to shop for a reasonable estimate and not be, kind of painted into a corner up against the clock to get something done, and use any contractor that has time and pay top dollar. So you want to give your sellers time to shop around and get a good deal on repairs. It also looks good. Sellers like that you did it. It's almost like a Carfax or certified pre-owned car. It's like, hey, we took it to the mechanic. Here's what he said. It's all good. So sellers, again, should prepare by having all the utilities on, pilots lit, everything functional and accessible. Dogs, this is another thing. The sweetest dogs in the world are scared when strangers are in their home. And a dog that would never bite somebody otherwise, you got, inspector with tools on and strange people looking all over the place. Inspectors have been bitten by dogs. And, I love dogs, but if I wasn't going to be there and strangers were coming into my house, I would secure my dogs just so I don't have that liability of perhaps having one of my dogs bite somebody. So make sure if there are dogs on the property that they're put away, kenneled, off the property, whatever it is, but don't just assume that the dog's going to be comfortable because they're just doing what dogs do and protect their property. The only other thing I would say is just to remind everybody who's watching is that we have a free white paper. Just go to our website at sdinspect.com and you can download a PDF file about what to expect when buying older homes. And it covers from the 20s through the 90s. And it really brings up things that new, younger homebuyers may not think of, and it helps you set that expectation.
All right, Philippe. So thank you so much for going over everything in detail. Now, you did share the website. So I'm going to bring that up because I believe seeing it will help, lock this into the memory. But right here, you can see sdinspect.com. You did mention the white sheet and a few other things they can go over. I noticed under the menu section, we have resources, and this is where we'll find a tremendous number of resources, as well as we're going to include a direct link to the white sheet they can download, as well as all your contact information. And then you're going to be joining us to come back in and talk about more trainings in the future. So is there anything else that we need to say?
Yeah. Nope, just everybody should let you know what topics they're interested in, and I'm happy to provide all the information we have.